Is this how I feel? Or did I pick up the energy and emotion of somebody around me? And just by differentiating, wait a minute, that's not my neck pain. That's not my depression. That's not my fear. That's not my anxiety. Then you can, even if you can't determine, okay, well, that was my husband, that was my son, you can, by differentiating and recognizing and affirming that's not your energy, you can usually clear a lot of it, right? So to answer your question, how can we get better at this? The first thing you want to do is learn about the 4 different psychic gifts and figure out what you're naturally good at. Now, big picture.
My guest today is Carrigan. She is a medical intuitive healer. She has written 10 books. She has her own show that reaches an audience of almost 50,000 people. So today is one of those shows that if you were looking for different modalities outside of the traditional ways of taking different drugs and trying to address issues that are ailing you, this is the show for you. So, Catherine, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Laurie. So, yeah, medical intuitive healer, author of 10 books, host of the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. How can I empower your audience?
Well, let me ask you this question, Catherine. For the people who are just tuning in right now, why do they want to spend the next 45 minutes listening to this conversation?
I would say it's about listening, learning to listen to your own soul, right? And so many people are listening to fear, especially now. They're confused, they're not grounded, they're in their head, they're worried. So it's about really learning how to listen to your own soul.
That is what this show is really about. It's called Waking You Up to the Power of Your Soul. So we are definitely in alignment for this conversation today. So someone doesn't necessarily come into this world, or they're a little kid thinking, I'm going to be a medical intuitive healer. How in the world did you get into this?
Well, of course, that would be a long story. Needless to say, sometimes people ask me, when did you realize you were intuitive? So I'll have to tell you this really great story. So I
Okay.
remember when I was 6 years old, it was my brother's birthday, and we lived in London at the time, and he had a birthday around Easter. So we had an Easter egg hunt. And my parents hid the eggs like they do, like parents do. And there was a lot of talk about the golden egg. And so I really wanted the golden egg. It sounded like a great thing. It was wrapped in gold foil, yummy chocolate. So the doors opened to let all the kids out into the garden, and I walked straight to the golden egg. And my parents assumed that I had cheated, which I actually didn't. I just really wanted that golden egg, and I set my intention to get the golden egg. And they literally opened the doors, and then 30 seconds, I was grabbing the golden egg. And of course, I was 7 years old at the time. My brother was 4. And so again, they assumed that I cheated. So they spanked me. And I hadn't cheated. I just used my higher guidance. And I think that many of us who are actually intuitive can recall stories in their life when you used your soul guidance to accomplish all kinds of things, right?
Well, I love that you're sharing that story because a lot of times when things happen like that to us when we're young, we then become conditioned to not utilize the gift that got us in trouble, that got us spanked. So, how did you overcome that and continue to develop the intuition despite having been reprimanded for using it in the first place?
Well, I went to an Ivy League college. I went to Brown University. When I was at Brown, I was Phi Beta Kappa. I never pulled an all-nighter. I made straight A's the entire time. And there again, I think that many of us who are naturally intuitive use our intuition about absolutely everything. And it's only later that, so early in our life, we may be unconsciously competent, where you're using your soul guidance to like see somebody and go, I should have nothing to do with that person. Or I really need to spend a lot of time listening to that person. So, again, even if you ask me how I made straight A's at Brown without pulling an all-nighter, I would say it was from using my intuition, right? And when I was at Brown, I had a wonderful professor. He became like the father I always wanted and never had. We had a very close relationship. I spoke to him every week for 27 years until he died in 2004. And I would have, if he taught how to change flat tires, that's what my major would have been. He happened to be chairman of the art department. So I ended up studying art history. And I remember as I was studying art history, you could name a painting like Cézanne's Bathers, and I would just immediately see it in my mind's eye. So some people refer to that as a photographic memory, but you could name a painting and I would remember what it looked like, right? So again, I think many people who are naturally intuitive have been using their gifts their whole life, and only later in their life do they start to really understand what I'm doing. And I remember in my early 30s, and I'll be 66 in a month, actually. I'll be 66 years old in a month. It's all real, my hair, my body, my wrinkles, my face. And in my early 30s, I went to study natural healing in Canada. And my mentor in healing sent us to a lady who helped you understand your intuitive gifts. Because she said, when you do healing work, you have to understand how you receive information. Otherwise, you just waste a lot of time. And I remember I was very reluctant because it was like, you know, I almost turned the car around on the way to visit this lady whose name was Faye. And when I get to Faye, she explained that my gift is claircognizance. And claircognizance is the gift of just psychic knowing. It's the same gift as Edgar Cayce. So with claircognizance, you just know things. And a lot of times you get advance warning. So for example, in London, I was in London in 2005, and I was scheduled to see 10 clients on a Thursday. And beginning earlier in the week, I began to get messages that there would be a problem. And the day before, I called the gentleman who had organized for 10 people to come see me, and I canceled 10 appointments. And I'm sure everyone was really upset with me until Thursday morning, about 10 a.m., when terrorists blew up the subway and 52 people died. And I was out for a walk. I remember it was a beautiful day, and suddenly my schedule was clear. And I came back from my walk in the sunshine, and somebody had the TV news on, and the subway had been blown up. So again, I think a lot of us are using our soul guidance all the time. And as we become aware of what we're doing, then we can use this gift for our highest good and the gifts of others.
So, the people in my audience who are watching, do you believe that everybody watching has the gift of intuition, number one? And number two, if that's true, which I think you're nodding your head, what can somebody do who isn't as connected naturally? Because you've used that word several times, naturally gifted, naturally connected to their intuition. What if somebody doesn't feel like they're naturally connected? What can they do to enhance this ability and bring it out more and be able to trust it, I guess, more?
Great question. Thank you, Lori. So first of all, I am nodding my head because you are a soul having a human experience. And another word for intuition is your soul guidance, right? And I always say, you only have to get hit over the head when you're not paying attention. When we're paying attention, we can get a little tap on the shoulder, and it's like, go here, do this, meet this person, don't meet that person, right? Right? I can remember one time being at a yoga conference and seeing a man way across the room. And I remember seeing that man, and my guidance said, don't have anything to do with him. And at the time, he was a very famous yoga teacher. Well, 20 years later, then it comes out he was stealing money from his corporation and having sexual relations with his major teachers. And it was so funny. I remember reading a news article, and I was like, I remember that guy 20 years ago. I got, don't have anything to do with them, right? So how can we get more connected? How can we get better at listening to our soul guidance? So my first piece of advice is to understand how you receive psychic information. Now, I wrote about this in depth in my book, Unlimited Intuition Now. Unlimited Intuition Now is one of my 8 Amazon #1 bestsellers, which you can get on Amazon. It's available. If you don't like to read, you can listen to it. So first of all, you have to understand how you get information. So for example, I'm not a great tennis player. You wouldn't hire me to be on your tennis team. And we all have natural gifts. And if you're trying to develop a gift that's not native to you, then it's going to be really hard, right? So what are the 4 kinds of ways that your soul can communicate with you? And I'm going to give you an overview. Clairsentience, which is psychic feeling. Clairaudience, which is psychic hearing. Okay. Claircognizance, which is psychic knowing. And then clairvoyance, right? Which is reception of images in your mind, right? So when I was talking about, being able to remember a painting, that's clairvoyance, right? So you have to understand, how am I most likely to receive these gifts? Because again, if you're trying to be clairvoyant and that's not your gift, and you're like, why can't I see everybody's aura? Why can't I see everybody's angels? What's wrong with me? So you have to understand there's actually nothing wrong with you. You just have to figure out what you're naturally good at and how you get information. Now, I would say that most people are, if you ask me, to sort of generalize, most people are clairsentient, and that is psychic feeling. Now, there's a great saying, trust the vibes, energy doesn't lie. So when you walk into a room and it's like, I don't know about this place, maybe I should leave. That's you reading the energy. If you are a massage therapist and you can put your hands on someone and know where the pain is, that's clairsentience. All the gifts have an upside and a downside. So the upside of being clairsentient is that most people who are clairsentient are just the sweetest people on the face of the earth. And they're very sweet and kind and considerate because they just automatically understand how everybody around them is feeling. Now, the downside of clairsentience, and I'm always talking to my feeler clients about this, is that it's very easy for you to pick up energy and emotions from other people. So you go to Walmart, the checker is grumpy, and you're grumpy when you leave. And it's like emotional contagion, if you will. Or you're living with your husband and he's depressed and exhausted, and your energy gets mixed up with his energy, right? And with my clairsentient people, I always talk about, if you put your hand on a hot stove, you don't go, oh my God, does my hand have cancer? Oh my God, is my hand mentally ill? You just take your hand off the hot stove and then everything's okay. When people are clairsentient, because they're picking up the energy and emotions of everybody around them, a lot of times they have trouble differentiating what is my feeling and what am I picking up from everybody else. So with the clairsentient people, one of the things that I advise them to do is 3 times a day, get by yourself and ask yourself a very simple question, which is, how do I feel? So let's say you wake up in the morning, you get by yourself, you spend about 5 minutes, you tune in. It's a beautiful day, you hear the birds singing, you feel calm and at peace. Well, that's your energy. That's how you're feeling. And then if your energy shifts within the next 5 to 8 hours, then you ask yourself a follow-up question. And I joke about this, is this me or Memorex? In other words, is this how I feel, or did I pick up the energy and emotion of somebody around me, right? And just by differentiating, wait a minute, that's not my neck pain. That's not my depression. That's not my fear. That's not my anxiety. Then you can, even if you can't determine, okay, well, that was my husband, that was my son, you can, by differentiating and recognizing and affirming that's not your energy, you can usually clear a lot of it, right? So to answer your question, how can we get better at this? The first thing you want to do is learn about the 4 different psychic gifts and figure out what you're naturally good at. Now, big picture, I believe that as we open up our gifts, that everyone can eventually open up all the gifts, right? It's like maybe if I tried really hard, I could play tennis, if I took lessons and so on. But at the same time, there's going to be gifts that are going to be most natural to you and that come most easily to you, right? And the next thing is, and this is super important, I remember when I studied medical intuition, the most important thing that I learned was a technique called source connection. Now, source connection is a technique that basically removes all psychic interference. And so if you think about like being connected, being spiritually connected, when every part of you is completely connected to God, then you will know whatever it is you need to know. And just like everything else, like let's say you're an astronaut going to the moon, you would have procedures. You'd put on your spacesuit and get in your spaceship, and you would go through procedures. There's a procedure that I do before I do medical intuitive reading where I connect every part of me to God. And even if it was connected like yesterday, I just check again just to make sure. And as you connect every part of you to God over and over and over again, day in and day out, then you become more and more of a clear channel. Now, I'm a big believer, like you are, Laurie, in giving to others, right? One day, it will happen that I am no longer with us. So I have left a pretty big footprint of information. You can read my 10 books. I have a YouTube channel. And if you go to my YouTube channel, I made a video on how to do the source connection, which is basically a simple little procedure where you connect every part of you to God. And that was probably the most important thing that I learned when I was studying medical intuition. The third thing that I would say, because you said, how can we ordinary people open up our soul gifts, and very, very simple, incredibly critical. And that is to have a regular prayer and meditation practice. Whenever I hear about people who don't have a prayer practice or don't have a meditation practice, it's like you are missing out on so much of what is really special, awesome, and incredibly nourishing for the soul. So for myself, when I wake up in the morning, and I usually wake up very, very early, like about 5 a.m., I meditate, I pray, I have a group of people that I pray for, and then after I meditate and pray, then I talk to my angels, which we'll get to in a minute. So why meditation? First of all, when you practice meditation, and meditation is hard for all of us. I mean, I'll be 66 in a month, and meditation's still hard for me. Like, I don't think I'm that great at it, but just because I don't think I'm good at it doesn't mean it's not good for me. It's like exercise or going to the gym. I may not be great at it, and it may be hard, but I'm going to do it anyway. So when you meditate, you work on your soul connection, right? And you work on quieting your mind. One of the biggest sources of interference to receiving soul information is actually your ego. And your ego is the unintegrated aspect of your shadow. And I'll teach you, remind me to teach you a really simple little technique in a minute to clear your shadow. So meditation practice, there's a free app called Insight Timer, and there's thousands of guided meditations on there. There's beautiful meditation music. There's mantras that you can listen to. So I listen to different guided meditations, different meditation music, different mantras. And then I also have a prayer practice. Now, why is that important? So I do a loving kindness prayer for all of my loved ones, my spiritual family. So first of all, just from a selfish point of view, when you pray for a group of people on a daily basis, on a soul level, you're going to be super connected and you're going to feel very close to them. And when you pray for people every single day, one of the side effects is you'll never be lonely. You'll never feel lonely. Some of the people that I pray for aren't even in the same country as me, but by praying for them every single day, I feel very connected with them at the soul level, right? So you want to have a prayer practice, and all prayer is good. I do the Lord's Prayer. And one of the things that I say about prayer, when you're doing a structured prayer, such as the Lord's Prayer, even if you're not paying attention, even if you have trouble stumbling over the words, what you're literally doing is you're putting yourself in a certain vibration, right? So when you do the Lord's Prayer, you're putting yourself in the same vibration as millions of people all over the world who are setting their intention to follow the will of God, right? And then I happen to do a loving kindness meditation prayer. I'll do this for Lori right now. Heavenly Father, may Lori be well and free from illness. May Lori be safe and free from harm. May Lori be happy. May Lori be at peace. I ask that this be done in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. So I have a group of people that I pray for by name, one by one. I never feel lonely. And when you pray like this on a daily basis, then you feel connected soul to soul. And we're talking about developing your intuition. So when you pray for people regularly, one of the things that you'll notice is that you're going to start feeling energetically connected. So that if one of my loved ones is having a hard day, I will know that because I've been praying for them. And maybe I think, wow, so and so is not doing so well. I need to pick up the phone and call them. And so it's a really simple, practical way to start using your intuition for people that you care about.
I love that. You have, look, I can understand exactly why you have so many followers on your YouTube channel and the wisdom that you've put out in your books and have these bestsellers, because I have been doing this for a very long time and you've shared a couple of things I've never heard anybody say. So I want to point them out because I want people to recognize that there are some different things. I think some people tune into these things and they think that they're hearing the same thing over and over again. And today is not the case. One of the things that I love that you mentioned is that there's an upside and a downside to all the clairs. I've never heard anybody talk about that. Super, super interesting. And also that in order to become more connected to your own intuition, that you must understand how you receive information. And your burner example is probably one of the most brilliant things I have ever heard, because what people tell themselves becomes their reality. And your point of, I would not put my hand on a burner and tell myself I'm mentally ill, I'm crazy, the way that they would when they're picking up other people's intuition. I have no idea how many people you have just freed with this idea, Catherine, but it's probably a lot. And since these videos live in perpetuity, I would imagine there are a lot of people who will share this, because when you become intuitive, more intuitive, sometimes you drive your own self crazy trying to ascertain, is this me? Is this somebody else? Or they share it and they're immediately discounted with their gifts because somebody else doesn't understand what they're going through. So thank you for those explanations and the detail and depth you went into so that people could understand their own gifts. Brilliant.
Thank you. And I'm happy to, again, trust me, I wrote a whole book about this. I can tell a lot. I was going to say about how I talk to my angels, but I'm gonna go back to what you said about the upside and downside.
Okay.
I'm gonna net it out to you. I'm gonna talk
Okay.
like we're women, so we can
Yeah.
talk forever. I'll net it out. All right. So I'm claircognizant.
Me too.
All right, there you go. So when you're claircognizant, you get information way ahead. All right. So let me give an example. So years ago, I was scheduled to teach a seminar. Two of my books are about how to heal depression naturally without drugs. And I was scheduled to teach a seminar in Seattle at the Holistic Depression Network. Well, anyway, long story short, I got the guidance not to go. And again, people had paid, they had signed up, just like the example in London, where 10 people were mad at me until they were not on the subway coming to see me and they didn't die. Maybe they were a little relieved. But at any rate, probably 3 or 4 months in advance, I was like, and I canceled. Well, and again, everybody was a little disappointed. And then the day before I was supposed to come in, an earthquake hit the airport. And I wasn't on the plane, I wasn't at the airport, I wasn't there. So that's like way in advance. So again, downside with claircognizance, you get information way in advance. So when you are claircognizant, like I got information when I was in London, uh, it happened on a Thursday. I got information on a Monday. That is a whole interesting discussion because I'd never been in the middle of a terrorist attack, praise Jesus, before. So I was like, what is this, right? And I remember it's worth kind of going into that because I remember I was on a train going into London and I felt this huge incoming negativity. And I was like, at first I thought, is somebody talking trash about me? I couldn't figure it out. And I'm a Reiki master healer, so teacher. So, I did my Reiki symbols, put my hands up. I couldn't stop the energy. And then the next day, I was in a crystal shop and which is a lot of fun. I'm sure your listeners love crystals. I'm wearing my angel aura quartz. I was in a crystal shop and I saw these two crystals and I'm like, I need that. Well, I went home, looked up in my crystal book what they're for, and they're to protect you against a psychic attack. So 2 days before the terrorists blew up the subway, I bought two crystals to protect myself from a psychic attack. And then interestingly, the day before the terrorists blew up, I went into London. I took the tube. I actually went through one of the stations that blew up. No problem. Went in, came back, no problem. But again, I canceled everything. So I wasn't in the middle of a terrorist attack. So claircognizant, you get things way in advance. And when you get things way in advance, there's no supporting evidence. And so if you don't trust yourself, if you don't realize that's your soul, then you can discount that. You're like, okay, maybe I should go and meet all those people or take that airplane and be in the middle of an earthquake or a terrorist attack. we talked about the clairsentience. What happens with the clairsentience people is you get your energy and emotions frequently mixed up with other people. So traditional psychologist would call this codependence. And there can be a degree of that, but it's literally a confusion in the energy where you're really not clear about what is mine and what is other people. Now, and again, I'm netting it out. Now, the clairvoyance, right, which is, seeing angels, seeing auras, all right, that's cool, right? To be, or to be doing a medical intuitive reading. A lot of times when I'm doing a medical intuitive reading or people start talking to me about their problem, I'll actually see in my mind's eye the organs that they're having trouble with, right? I'll see their brain or I'll see their heart or whatever it is that's an issue. But so one of the downside about the clairvoyance is people get stuck in their picture. So let's say that you've been a librarian, for 20 years, and then something happens and they shut down the library. Well, you can only see yourself a certain way. And so clairvoyant people have a hard time changing their picture. So I've been a librarian. I don't know what else I should do with myself. I'm lost. I'm stuck. And one of the things that really helps clairvoyant people is to create two pictures. It's like, well, I've been a librarian, but I could be happy as a fisherman. And I get up early every day. I put on my overalls. I go out fishing with my buddies, and then I come back and drink beer with my friends. Or I could be happy working in the forest and being a forester, or again, when people are trying to, should I have children or not have children? We'll create two pictures from you from the beginning of your life to the end with children and see yourself being happy having kids, and then create another picture, you to the end of your life without having kids. So creating two pictures so you don't get stuck in your picture. And then clairaudience, this is reception of information through words. So there's several downsides to clairaudient. When you're clairaudient, your soul guidance will drop in very quickly, often as words, and then you get it mixed up and think it's your thoughts, right? So you have to become really good at understanding what's your soul guidance and what's your ego. And one of the things that holds back clairaudient people is that in our culture, we're taught you're supposed to stop and think, right? I mean, how many times, you're growing up, stop and think about that. Well, when you're clairaudient or claircognizant, the information comes in very fast, unlike clairsentience or clairvoyance, usually. And when you're claircognizant or clairaudient, if it takes you more than 30 seconds, you're wrong. It's your ego, and we all have an ego. And, our ego can get in there and go, are you sure? I'll tell you a story about clairaudience. So years ago, 2018 specifically, I got guidance that I needed to write a book about breathing. Now, I'm human like everybody else, and I argued with my soul. I'm like, what do you mean? Everybody knows you should breathe. And again, I've now at this point taught yoga for 30 years. And so I know all about breathing. I used to have asthma, and it was through breath work and practicing yoga that I got over my asthma. So 2018, you need to write a book about breathing. I'm arguing with myself, but the guidance was so clear and so persistent. You need to write this book. So finally, I'm like, okay, I give up. And I'm like, who's going to buy a book about breathing? Who needs a book? Who's going to read a book about breathing? Who needs that? So finally, I'm like, okay, I give up. I'll do it. Finish the book, March 2019. It's called The Little Book of Breathwork. And when I finish it, I'm like, okay, I get it. It's friendly, it's easy, it's not complicated. It includes information about a breathing technique, a breathing practice that will cut anxiety in half in 8 minutes. It's called 8 Minutes to Inner Peace. And you can learn the videos, learn it for free on YouTube. Okay. 8 Minutes to Inner Peace. Breathing, affirmations, and hand mudras. So what happens a year later? March 2020, the pandemic. I gave that book away for free to people in 17 different countries during the pandemic. And it was because I listened to my soul guidance, even though I argued with myself, right? And so I just shared that because if you're listening, you probably receive soul guidance and you argue with yourself. That's what we humans do. It's like, seriously, are you kidding? And then Esquire magazine named that book, The Little Book of Breath Work, one of the 30 best wellness books of all time. So
It's amazing.
I know. And it was just like me arguing with myself. And so if you're listening and your soul keeps saying, you need to do something, you need to do something, and then you're arguing, well, then it's okay to be human. But when it keeps coming in like that, then you just really have to pay attention and like me, just go, okay, I give up.
Oh my gosh.
Fine.
I love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much. So these are so helpful. You are handing out the gold nuggets from your wisdom so that people can take this information and apply it in whatever way they need when they're listening. And so I'd really like to switch gears a little bit and go into the medical intuitive healing because
Mhm.
I'm really curious about how that first manifested itself for you with your clear cognizance.
Great. Thank you so much for asking. So as I mentioned, I'll be 66 in a month. And I've studied a lot of things. I'm very curious. I've studied healing all over the world. And in my 40s, I knew that by the time I was in my 50s, which again was like 16 years ago, that I would be doing primarily healing work, right? And I remember it takes a lot of courage to go. First of all, it takes a lot of courage to say I'm intuitive, right? And I'm a professional intuitive, right? And again, I was Phi Beta Kappa. I gave the Phi Beta Kappa speech when I graduated. I have a lot of left brain series training, right? And I can talk left brain or I can go completely woo-woo, whatever you need. Um, but I remember somebody saying to me in my late 40s, they said, you're really good at a lot of things, but where the skill that you have as a medical intuitive cannot be taught or learned. And I have done some past life regressions through hypnosis, and I've definitely had multiple past lives as a medical intuitive, and I can go into that, but I remember seeing it and understanding it. So again, if you're listening, I think that many people who are really good at certain things, they did it before. Like one of my best friends is an artist. Well, I mean, I could never do what she does, right? And, there's some people who are just really good at writing or singing. And it's like you have honed that talent over and over and over again through multiple lifetimes. And one of my past lives that I remembered, I was a little brown Indian man, and people would come up to me, and then I would look into their left eye, and there were two people next to me. I'd look in their left eye, and then I would recommend herbs. And then the scribes would write down they need this or that herb, and then I'd say a prayer of them. And then the next person would come up. So again, I think that we've had that experience. But big picture, in this lifetime, I work for a healing center in Costa Rica, and before the owner hired me, he got readings on himself from 100 different intuitives from all over the world. And they hired me because I was the most accurate. And
Well,
before
that says a lot.
that says a lot. And then before anybody gets there, they send me their photograph. Okay. And it has to be a photograph, no sunglasses, current photo. I look right into their left eye and then I know everything.
Because it's claircognizant, so it's almost like a download for you, correct?
It's a download. Yeah. And obviously I do work with people on Zoom, like in real time. The younger people call it IRT, in real time. But I do these reports. So they send me their photograph and they fill out a form. And I have people who don't speak English and they can't put down anything. All I get is their photo. And again, it's just this download, everything I need to know. But going back to your original question, which is how can we develop our intuition? When I wrote my second book, What is Healing? I only had one thought when I started, which is, and I'm going to repeat this. If you don't remember anything I say today, this is what I want you to remember. When you learn to love unconditionally, you know whatever it is you need to know. So I'll say that again. When you learn to love unconditionally, you will know whatever you need to know. And so many people think that intuition is judgment. And as Mother Teresa said, if you judge people, you have no time to love them, right? And so people come to me for, every kind of problem you could possibly imagine, including people who've maybe made a few mistakes, and who hasn't? That would be all of us, right? And again, but if you judge people, it shuts down your intuition. You have to be in a state of unconditional love where you see the person in front of you as a soul. And as a soul, every soul is whole and complete. We may have gone through a lot, we may have suffered, we may even be in pain, but as a soul, you are whole and complete. You have everything you need, even if it's a phone number, right? You're already on your life path, even if you don't understand what it is. So
I agree.
so by loving people, then you know whatever you need to know. And I would say that compassion is the highest form of wisdom.
Letting that sink in. Compassion is the highest form of wisdom. Tell me why you think that.
Well, so let's talk about it from a scientific point of view. Okay, you have a heart, you have a brain, okay? And I believe that the EKG of your heart is 30 to 35 times more powerful than your EEG, right? So we've all met people who are brainiacs, who are super smart. Nobody listens to them. They have all this knowledge, which is a good thing. It's helpful, right? But when we connect with people heart to heart, that's when you have the biggest impact, right? And if you think about people who love you and who you love, and when you feel loved, when a loved one says something, then, and you know that you're loved and that they're coming from a place of love, you're more likely to listen to what they have to say, right?
Absolutely.
So the wisdom of your heart is absolutely greater than the wisdom of your brain.
Yes, that makes so much sense. That's why you say listen to your heart. I mean, the brain has to weigh in, but listen, check in with your heart. How does your heart feel? So I want to ask you this question. I've been dying to ask you this.
Okay.
As a medical intuitive healer, I would imagine that you have heard things that just shocked you. And then you've probably been able to get confirmations in some way, shape, or form later. So, will you share a couple of things that you knew intuitively that almost sounded like, I don't know if I can even say this because I'm just so internally shocked at what I'm uncovering and hearing.
Yes, I've had clients, I'm like, "You've got a problem with your liver or whatever." They go to the Mayo Clinic and it's confirmed, okay? Um, maybe I'll give you one of the more shocking ones. Earlier in my career, and I rarely, if ever, talk about this, but earlier in my career, a Catholic priest came to me, and he had severe depression for about 5 years and severe pain in his jaw. And I tuned in about, what's wrong, what's really wrong here, right? Because he couldn't get rid of either problem. And I remember tuning in, and I got that he was possessed. And I'm like, oh, great. You are going to tell a Catholic priest that they are possessed. Like, oh, great, but I tuned in and I'm like, no, he can accept it. And I said, you have an entity attached. I said, I respect your spiritual tradition. I respect all spiritual traditions. It's all different paths to one God. And I said, I recommend that you get this taken care of within your spiritual tradition. He wasn't able to get it taken care of. So I took care of it. And his jaw pain went away, his depression went away. And that
That's
was,
pretty incredible.
yeah, there you go. So, but somebody reached out to me this week and they're like, well, I want to go ahead and get this over with because I'm really scared about having a medical intuitive reading. I said, why are you scared? She's like, I'm afraid about what you might say to me. And, if you're listening to me, I don't seem like a scary person. I'm 5'3", not very big. If you met me on the street, you'd think just a regular little old lady. And, I'm very practical and solution oriented. So even when I have clients with stage 4 breast cancer, I'm always talking to you, okay, here's your next step. Here's what you can do to be at more at peace. Here's what you can do to be at, to move the ball forward, right? Because we're all moving the ball forward. We're all taking steps on our spiritual journey. So, also, the other thing to understand is that sometimes, again, going back to your question about intuition, I think sometimes people are afraid of what they will hear, right? But the thing that you need to understand is that your soul guidance is absolutely never, ever, ever scary. So even when I got the guidance, cancel, don't go to the airport, which I found out 4 months later had an earthquake, or don't get on, don't go into London. It was just like that. It was practical. It's like, you just need to cancel all those clients and not go into London. And all I got was that if I went into London, I'd have a really hard time getting back. So it wasn't scary. It's just like not a good idea. So I'm not scary. There's nothing to be afraid of. And when you're in a state of love and appreciation and compassion, then you can also have that for yourself. And I think that so many people are really hard on themselves. You know, the social media, I think, is terrible because we're
I
all
agree.
multimillionaires, size, whatever, you know, with plastic surgery and just, let's just be real. And I'm real. So, and we need to be real with each other. And part of being real is having compassion because life is not always easy.
Yeah, that's true. I loved also, not only did you say that you are a medical intuitive healer, but you also believe that we all have the ability to heal ourselves. And one of the things that I've talked about quite a lot on this show, especially when I talk to people who have these gifts, is that I believe in the future that everything will get away from traditional pharmacological medicine and everything will be in the form of vibration, light, frequency. So will you speak to that and also
Absolutely.
yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
So you have to understand that everything is vibration, right? So Nikola Tesla, and I'm going to completely garble the quote. He said that if you want to understand, I guess, life, it's just think of frequency and vibration, right? So whether it's a pharmaceutical drug or a flower essence or a homeopathic remedy or a natural supplement, it's all vibration. And sound healing is a vibration, right? And when you understand illness, all illness is slowed down vibration. So I'll give several examples of this. We've all had this. Everybody who's listening, you probably at one point in your life had a cold, right? I had a cold about 2 weeks ago. What happens when you have a cold? You can barely get off the couch. You blow your nose, you're slowed down, right? All illness is slowed down vibration, and healing happens when you lift your vibration, right? I have a healing room. I work out of my house. My healing room is full of orchids. I have floor to ceiling windows full of orchids. And people walk in the room and they're like, I feel better already because it's a high vibration environment, right? And so most natural healing remedies are based on vibration. People sometimes ask me what I think the most powerful natural healing remedies are, and I actually say flower essences. Flower essences are vibrational remedies. They're made from flowers. They're very inexpensive. I have flower essences from all over the world, and they work on the emotional, mental, and spiritual levels, right? And even when you understand vibration, illness begins in your energy field and comes into the physical body. So illness begins in the spiritual, mental, emotional, energetic, and then comes into the physical. And when we want to heal, it's got to go out through the physical body, through the energy body, through the emotional, through the mental, and the spiritual. And what's unique about my work as a medical intuitive healer, when I do a medical intuitive reading, I'm reading the 5 levels. So many of my clients, they're working really hard on one level. They're eating well or exercising, and they're a mental wreck or what have you. And so I'm kind of like a little detective, like, where are the blocks? Where is this energy block? And so when you heal, you've got to move it out through these levels, right? And then when I do healing work, I can work on every level. I can work on the soul, the mind, the emotions, the energy, or the physical, right? My 10th book is called Reading the Soul, and it's about when I do a medical intuitive reading, what I look for when, when I'm looking at your soul, what's going on with your soul, right? And when you understand what's going on with your soul, that's what's really happening. That's the real show.
So I understand that everybody's different in what they're drawn to, but I'm curious, since you mentioned the flower essences, I love flowers so much. I try to have fresh flowers. I try to have them in my yard. I smell them. I spend time smelling them in nature. Do you have a flower essence that you were especially drawn to that you love?
Well, I actually created a flower essence from one of my orchids in my healing room.
I didn't
And
know that orchids had a smell, really.
orchids have not all orchids have smell. And even the ones that bloom, when they do have a smell, it's for a period of time. And so sometimes I'll go down to my healing room and it's the most transcendent smell you've ever smelled. Big picture, orchids are the most evolved flowers on the face of the earth. So they make the most powerful flower essences. And I have a really good friend in Scotland. His website is healingorchids.com. And what's really cool, many people are familiar with the Bach flower remedies, which were made, roughly in the 1920s. Well, my friend Don Dennis is making flower essences like right now for the illnesses and the challenges and the spiritual, energetic uh, imbalances that we're facing currently. And you can find his work at healingorchids.com.
Oh, I'm so glad you shared this, and I'm super glad I asked that question. Just off on a small tangent, I was in Egypt 3 weeks ago, and what's interesting about Egypt is their hieroglyphics show blue lotus as a healing modality. And to my understanding, blue lotus doesn't exist the way that it did those many years ago. Is there something that you've encountered? Are you familiar with this? And is there something you've encountered that's kind of close? And maybe it's the orchid is the answer, but
That's a great question. I have not been to Egypt and I am not familiar with the blue lotus. Um, my book cover of the little book of breath work has a photograph that I took of a lotus, a
oh
beautiful.
my gosh, of course it does. It's in every single temple, every single pyramid that you ever will visit that has hieroglyphics. Lotus are depicted all over, and they're depicted as being smelled and also just in the bottom parts of pictures because of the power of what those fragrances did to the senses.
Yes, yes. So
That's super cool.
yes, and I raise orchids in my healing room, and anyway.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, Catherine, what else do you want us to know about healing and where healing is going to go in the future?
Well, I think what's happening is that as more people are understanding the lack of integrity in the drug companies, that they're going to be more open to natural healing. The average person who comes to see me has seen at least 7 other practitioners. Like, people don't usually go to their medical intuitive first. They've been to the doctor, they've been to the physical therapist, they've been to the naturopath and the psychologist, and they're like, I just got a call today from a Swiss gentleman. He's like, the neurologists have no idea what's wrong with me. Right? And it's like, okay, so now we'll look at that bigger picture. So I think that as people come to understand, I always talk about the 5 levels of healing. So when people talk about healing, they usually think about their physical body, right? In yoga, we talk about mind, body, and spirit. You actually have 5 levels. The physical body, you know what that is. Your energy body includes your breath, your acupuncture system, and the chakras. The emotional body, emotions can shut down anything. Your mental body, which is your thoughts and beliefs. So if you don't think you can get well, that's a block. And I do a very complicated healing on being willing to get well. There's 25 different payoffs for staying sick and miserable. And then finally, the soul level, right? So everything's always happening on all 5 levels. And when you work on all 5 levels simultaneously and understand how to push the levers in your own system, then miraculous healings can occur. I work with a client. I worked with a gentleman in Chattanooga. I'm in Atlanta. After our second session, he's 62 years old. He had seizures his whole life. He actually works in the hospital. He would have a seizure every single day. He would drop to the floor. People would step over him. And this is going on every day, at least once a day, sometimes twice a day. After our second session, his seizures completely stopped. No remedies, no food changes, just natural healing, energetic healing over Zoom. So there's tremendous possibilities in natural healing. Part of the reason that I share information is my own mentor in healing is retired now. And I realize there's all this information out there that's available to help people. And I'm very encouraging of younger healers. I want other people to know that you can make a career out of this. You can support yourself and your family. You can pay your bills and help people. And a lot of it's about having really good information and having really good tools and looking at that bigger picture.
Wow. Well, I would imagine that a lot of people who are watching will want to connect with you, connect with your books, and connect with your YouTube channel. So, will you share how people can work with you?
Sure. I have a website, CatherineCarrigan.com, and my name is Catherine with a C, last name Carrigan, CARRIGAN.com. Again, I'm a big believer in giving, because in my view, you can't outgive God. And
Mm.
so many people do not understand karma. So whatever you put out is what you receive back. So the most selfish thing I can ever do is give to others from the depths of my soul. And again, one day I will no longer be with us. But you can go to my YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and just look up CatherineCarrigan.com, I interview the top experts in the world in natural healing on all kinds of subjects. I've created videos. I've taught a lot of techniques. You can go and learn techniques, for example, about how to heal your brain or yoga or all kinds of things. So, and then on Amazon, you can read my books. I've published 10 books. 8 of them are available as audiobooks. If you don't like to read, you can listen, right? And so, but you need to know that you can heal yourself naturally.
Wow. Well, I will put all the information down in the show notes so that people can find it. Catherine, this has been such an enlightening and informative conversation. I appreciate so much the wisdom that you're sharing with the audience. And I want to thank you for what you are doing to help wake up the collective. It is so needed right now.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.